Hi everyone, and welcome to our fortnightly update on how the events industry is responding to COVID-19. I'm Lauren Demille-Meester from the business development team here at HireSpace Professional, and will be hosting you today. So once again, you'll be able to find a link to the latest version of our Safer Events white paper below the stream for the latest measures, as well as more on our Safer Events accreditation for both venues and organizers. We're pleased to announce that the Business Design Center are actually in the final steps of completing their accreditation. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Charlotte Gentry, founder and CEO of Pure Events and on the board of the Events and Visual Communication Association, and again by Richard Groves, who's director at Smart Group. If you have any questions for the speakers, you can submit them in the comments below the live stream or use the hashtag @HSPresents, and we will be picking those up towards the end. So today we're going to be focusing on how individual organizations are responding to the ambiguity of government guidelines for events and what steps are they taking to adapt. So let's just jump straight into the first question. Tell us quickly about how your business and how you first reacted when lockdown started. How have you needed to basically pivot your business in light of the current circumstances? Maybe Charlotte, you want to take the lead?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Lauren. We, as a Pure Communications Group, have made a decision last year to actually adapt our business and to become a much greater integrated communications agency. So that, without knowing that COVID was coming around the corner and all of these terrible problems were going to ensue, has actually served us quite well. We have a much more diverse offering than just producing live events, which incorporates digital, technical, campaign management, and campaign design and creative design. And so all of those elements are what we're obviously really focusing on now. But the way in which we're really approaching the scenario is talking to each and every one of our clients about what their challenges are. And in actual fact, we sent out a survey about 3 weeks ago, to try to understand what challenges our clients are really facing at the moment, because the corporate clients have also got enormous challenges at the moment if they're working within events departments, and it's a very isolating time. So I think that our clients are struggling as much as agencies are struggling, and trying to help them to navigate their way through this difficult time is really what we're trying to do in terms of support and guidance, and working more on an event consultancy basis for our clients, to offer them advice about the best tools that are in the marketplace as far as online and hybrid events are concerned. We are not professing to be the specialist in producing online events, because it's only big production agencies that actually have all the equipment in-house, and digital and technical teams that actually are well equipped to do that. However, what we are specialists at are project managing, whether it's online or hybrid, and having done the research in the marketplace to know exactly what the right tools are for the right transmission method. That's exactly what we are specialists at. So we've spent the last 2 to 3 months doing a lot of research around it. And as a result, can go out to our clients and explain to them, if they are looking to produce a message campaign of some description, the best way for them to actually transmit that, not necessarily via Zoom, because everyone is, or Teams, because people are getting Zoom and team fatigue now, I think, but in a more engaging way. And it seems to be that the biggest challenge that people are having are how to make these online events increasingly more engaging, and that's really where we're focusing on. And we've managed to pick up quite a bit of work based on that engagement piece and how to creatively design online events with engagement and interaction in mind.
Thank you for that. And Richard, how has the Smart Group adapted?
Well, we're in the perfect storm when it all happened, because Smart Group sell and market and manage venues. We're a catering company, and we also have an event management company. And so all our work disappeared within about a month for the rest of the summer. And we just thought that every month went by, it might protect the autumn. So we thought, everything that's been cancelled in June will now be held in October, but then all the October dates were then being cancelled as well. And so the diary is now fundamentally empty. And as a catering company, that meant we had to take some very quick decisions about how many staff we needed to retain on furlough and short-term working and on sabbatical. Because when there's no catering or events to be run, you don't need an events team of 45 people. And so that's the process we've been going through at the moment. But on the plus side, we've also seen opportunities within it, like Charlotte was saying, that it makes you look at what you do, and it also, and not by taking other people's misfortunes, but by saying, okay, this opportunity is there. It's a time to have a conversation with a client who might be nervous about doing this event again. But if we can reconfigure it or think of a different way of attacking that market, then we can come up with a solution for it, retain that client, retain that business, and actually make something more tangible for all parties. And also it meant that we could go to clients and say, we want to protect particular catering revenue. So if you don't want to do this event again because you're nervous of it, it maybe doesn't fit your profile anymore, we will buy that event from you and then protect our catering revenue, or to then run that event. We picked up 2 really nice big corporate and public events, one at Battersea and one in the city, that we're going to run next year. That the owners of those businesses didn't want them anymore because they were concentrating on more core business, or they hadn't got the infrastructure to run these events. So on one hand, it's been a really bloody period. It's been very hard to work out what to do to protect the mothership, to make sure that the right number of people are in marketing and sales and delivery for a very different market, and which might not come back until the new year. But then also keep talking to our clients, keep talking to our venues and our agents, and say, we're here to help whenever we can. It might be in a different role, but we can do it for you.
Yeah, communication is definitely key in these times. So how did you react as a business to what was or wasn't said about the events industry by the government last week? Charlotte, you might want to lead on this one.
Yeah, sure. To be honest with you, whether one believes what the government are doing is right or wrong, or what they may or may not have done, and for which industry sector, my personal view has been that we'll take whatever we can from government in terms of support, but I'm not expecting anything from anybody. So my expectations of government support have actually been relatively low. And as Richard alluded to, we made some very difficult decisions very, very early on in this process to mitigate our own risk. And so I think that the government has got a very, very difficult challenge on their hands. I think they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. I think that they have never been in a situation of this complexity or enormity before. And they're a relatively new government as well, based on the team that's been put together. And I think they're getting a lot of flack for what they're not doing. Yes, the events industry definitely needs some support, and in comparison to the hospitality sector, hasn't been given it. So I understand why people are feeling as though they're not being given enough support by the government. But at the same time, this is a global phenomenon, and it's creating a global recession, and global recessions are cyclical. And the pandemic has brought this one on. And I think that my advice would be not to expect handouts in any way, because at the end of the day, whatever handouts are given, of which I believe we're somewhere in for 150 billion at the moment, that money has got to get repaid in some way or another eventually, because we can't just, they're not just printing money. So unfortunately, there will be a large sector of society that will have to pay that back. So, and it's likely to be the lowest income bracket that will actually also have to pay that back, because they are the largest sector in the country in terms of income tax. So I think there are multiple challenges here. And my view, to be honest, I got so sick of listening to the briefings at 5 o'clock every afternoon, because I didn't feel like I was actually being told anything of any consequence whatsoever, apart from how many more people had died within 24 hours, which, as tragic as that is, it doesn't really help you knowing those statistics. What you really want to know is, how does it affect me? How does it affect the future? What do I need to be doing? We're aware that people are dying of this ghastly virus, and it's horrendous. But the information and I think the communications within the government have not been strong at all. And there's been a lot of ambiguity and a lot of conflicting information. And so I think people in this country are just very confused, not just on a business level, but also on a personal level. You know, I can now go to the supermarket, but I can walk in there today without a face mask, but on the 24th of this month, I can't walk in there without a face mask. So, you know, I can go and spread my virus to all and sundry in theory today, but I can't do that on the 24th. Why they don't make the announcements and then just say, as of today, you need to have a face mask on. So it's all been quite difficult and quite strange, but I think one has to just paddle your own canoe and not expect a huge amount, and whatever you do get back is a bonus.
Yeah, and Richard, what's your take on it?
Well, I think the government was elected on a sort of populist ticket to say that we're going to be really generous and inclusive, and everybody's going to love us. And after the austerity and the rather dour Theresa May period, then Boris came in bouncing, full of energy and full of beans, and said, right, this is all going to be different. Everybody's going to love us, because it's just a job he's wanted since he was a child. Now you look at him and you think, there's a man who's not enjoying his job at all. This is not what he signed up to do, to oversee this pandemic. And I think they have been left wanting in a lot of areas. You know, the team that they've got is not the strongest senior minister team. They are really racing to try and keep up with it. And in a way, in their defence, of course they are. That word that everybody keeps using and should be banned afterwards finishes unprecedented. It is unprecedented. No one has ever done anything like this before, or tried to manage a country through this. So you can understand why they're making it up as they go along. But the desire not to clamp down too quickly, not to be too draconian on social distancing and masks and locking down particular cities, has come back to haunt them. And I still haven't seemed to have learned from it. As Charlotte said, you know, why my sister's birthday on the 24th of July is the day we have to put a mask on, and why not tomorrow? It's just really weird. And you know, mandatory isn't mandatory. I watched the bus go past the other day, and 4 people out of 8 didn't have masks, and you're not supposed to get on a bus unless you put a mask on. So it's very hard, and Charlotte said we've all got to look after ourselves a bit. Most people are quite sensible and work out what they need to do. Now, on the government's approach to business, I think the Chancellor has been very dramatic and has spent an awful lot of money and has to. Whether it's targeted in the right way, furlough was. The bounce back loan seems to be taken up by everybody who's got a limited company, and everybody's applying for these loans and thinking, that's marvellous, the money trees in my back garden, I'm just going to keep taking it off of it. But then when they do listen, they get it right, like the performing arts, which is a bit like events. It's a huge industry in this country. It's world renowned as being the fulcrum of great stage and ballet and opera and arts, and should be protected. But then they don't seem to listen about hospitality, because again, we employ a huge number of people seasonally and full time. It creates an awful lot of income, an awful lot of duty and VAT receipts on the alcohol that we serve, the subcontractors that we employ, who then also pay their taxes. You know, if this is decimated by 30 to 40%, so the events business is going to be only 60% of what it was in 2019. The fallout of that is going to be huge. And you either just say it's going to be huge and they'll all have to be taken with credit, or what can we do to bring that work back? But we come back to what we were actually saying before this started. It's all a confidence thing now. Is a guest confident to go to an event? Is the client, the host, confident to invite people and feel it's their moral duty to protect these people? So maybe they shouldn't all get in the room, because they don't all get in the room. The venues don't earn money, the caterers don't earn money, the production companies don't. So it's a real difficult circle here. But when to puncture it and start saying, you can start doing these things. You can start going back into theatre, which means you can also go back into the conference centre. Cameron Mackintosh isn't opening his theatres until the middle of next year. He just doesn't think it's worth it. He can't afford it. That's demonstrably a hard place to be, because again, that's all the add-on businesses to the theatrical world. Without any income for another 6 months.
Yeah.
We will be positive at the end of this, I promise you.
Yes, and I know that both of you touched on it actually, so I thought I might just jump straight into one of the next questions. So in your view, what would be actually the most helpful thing that the government could do for the industry right now?
I think I'm talking from the Smarts perspective, because we had 105 people on the payroll in February. We know we're not going to need that number to keep the company running until the business starts coming back, which potentially might not be till spring next year. There will be some, there has to be some events this year, because I think the latent desire for entertainment is there, but it's just the way of doing it. And I fear that if the furlough scheme isn't either extended or tapered in a different way for particularly susceptible industries, then those industries will fall. So it's a bit like saying to pubs and restaurants, okay, it's gone down from 2 meters to 1 meter plus now. That means that actually it's almost viable for quite a lot of the business to reopen, whereas for 2 meters it wasn't. And so they would never open, and their staff would come back, and they wouldn't have any supplies coming in from the green grocer and the fishmonger. So because basically the government is saying you can't hold an event over a certain number of people, they are responsible for the fact that we haven't restarted the business. There is 50% of it is natural lack of confidence not to go to crowded space. But on the other hand, the government is saying, no, you can't do it. So, like contracts, if the venue says you can't do your event, and the client gets all their money back. The client says, I don't want to do the event. They don't get all their money back. They're cancelled. So the government has to support the fact that they are keeping businesses closed, therefore how those businesses are going to restart and with how many people. They can't afford to pay people if they haven't got any money coming in.
Yeah, and Charlotte?
I think also, for us, we have a lot of the events that we produce are there's a lot of travel involved. So because we're very conference and incentive based, we have actually, in theory, got a job that's still geared to take place in September in Ibiza, which is positive for a number of people, and they're refusing not to go ahead with it. So which is great news on a positive level, and it's private equity. So that's one industry that presumably are actually they're not British, so that's probably the reason why they're Dutch. But I think that the travel industry alongside our industry has been horribly affected. And I think that the travel restrictions, which are slowly opening up, I think people need to feel more confident about wanting to travel. There's obviously the added impact of sustainability as well now on travel. And it will decimate certain businesses that are heavily involved in producing global meetings overseas. So, just literally before the lockdown, we produced a 250 person event in Mumbai for a global conference, bringing all the MDs and CEOs of that business together in Mumbai. Will those kind of events be able to take place in the future? Will people's perception of whether they can and should get on an airplane to go and have that meeting in a particular destination around the world, will those pieces of activity still be able to happen in the same way? And the government have got to be able to, the messaging has got to fundamentally change, as Richard said. It's got to shift from project fear into, okay, we're all safe now, let's go back out into the world again. Now, whether that's right or wrong, or whether or not that's actually true that we're all safe, there's a really big problem between the safety and the economics. So how do the government strike that balance of making sure that we don't all go under because there isn't any work there, because the perception is we shouldn't be getting on aircraft, or 300 people shouldn't be flying in different parts of the world to go to a meeting, and that meeting would have generated a huge amount of, a fair amount of income for a business like ours. So I think that the government have got a really testing time ahead. As an example, I had a baby on the 17th of April, was meant to have him christened on the 14th of June. Spoke to the church yesterday. I can do it in September, but I can only do it for under 30 people. And I can't do it as part of an ordinary church service anymore, and we've probably all got to be wearing masks. So it's got to be a very different experience. And all the red tape that you now have to go through, fine, we're lucky enough to be able to do it at all, but it's just the parameters are just so different that it makes people think, well, do we really actually want to be holding an event if we've all got to be doing it with face masks on? The whole experience and the environment of it is so different as well. And this is messaging that's got to change over the course of months, and unfortunately it's not going to happen straight away.
Yeah, for sure.
Agree.
And so I know we both touched on this, you both touched on this throughout the webinar, but what are your biggest challenges as a business right now?
Well, I think personally, any business, the primary focus is around generating revenue, because it's sustainability of your business over a course of time. It's cash flow. It's making sure that you are speaking to your clients and staff as much as possible, because it has been a very isolating time for everybody. And the challenge is adapting and adapting quickly, and also turning those adaptations into sustainable revenue, and feeling comfortable about the choices that you're making and creating engaging experiences that can't be done face to face.
Richard?
Yeah, similarly. On the business sense, on the commercial sense, this is the same now as any major financial crash. And I've worked through about 3 recessions and the financial crash and 9/11. And what you have to do is you have to check the mothership, make sure there is a business going forward, which makes some unfortunate, uncomfortable, brutal decisions necessary, but one has to do it because the business needs to be still there for when it starts working, and then you can start re-employing people. So it is a case of checking overheads, making sure you're fit for purpose, making sure that the people that are coming back to work feel safe and secure, and at least if not happy because some of their workmates might not be there, but at least they feel comfortable that you're doing anything you possibly can to mitigate that. And then start rebuilding. Tell the clients you're open for business. In the past, the only way out of these things was to market your way out of business and be the one making the loudest noise to say, we're still in business, we've addressed the market. Unfortunately, on that side of it, this is different than the other recessions because it's this nervousness and government diktats that you can't operate more than 30 people, and it's just everything hobbling the whole idea of reopening the business in the way it was in 2019. However, on the positive side, I think there is a latent desire within business as there is in the private markets to get on and do it. When you see a pub open or you see people going back to restaurants, people are desperate to meet and have dinner with each other and have a drink. Businesses know they need to bring their staff back into the fold and be that paternalistic mothership that they all want to work for, and thank them for the last 5 months of working at home and not enjoying it. They will need to bring people together because people will be working at home. So where are we going to put them in a room so they can actually all say hello to each other again, rather than Zooming, which is a distancing device. There'll be I think there will be lots of work. I think it will get very busy quicker than we possibly think it would in our darkest moments, but it's going to, it won't be early autumn by any means, because we're all waiting for a spike after summer. It'll start getting cold, flu will start coming back. It could end up being quite tricky going forward, and if more lockdowns happen, then it'll all be shunted back again. But it's resilient, the business is resilient, the people are resilient, and we will make the best of it, and we will come back. I'm absolutely sure we will come back.
For sure. And on that note, what are you both most optimistic about at the moment? Charlotte, would you like to take the lead? You're on mute, Charlotte.
Apologies. Sorry, somebody turned up at the back door, and dogs were barking. So I think that like in any, as Richard was saying, I experienced the 2008 recession, and therefore had to, I know what it feels like to scale back down to then rebuild. Obviously wasn't planning on having to do it again. But I think that what it does do is it gives you the time for reflection of looking at what was working in a business, what isn't working in a business, how the business can be adapted to reflect the way in which the industry is moving in general. And I think that there are opportunities now to be more creative, I think, and more collaborative within the industry in general. I think agencies especially have been super protective of their clients, which is entirely understandable. But I think now more than ever, there is a need to communicate a lot more. I think that there is a need to collaborate with different suppliers and even with various agencies. I think that there will be, amongst all of this, I think there will be a lot of mergers and acquisitions going on, because I think we've already seen one with unicorn events take place with Cheerful 21st. So, I think that there will be a lot more mergers taking place, and therefore, as a result of that, opportunities therefore arise. And I think that you just come out a lot stronger and a lot more robust, having gone through this type of experience, as painful as it is to be going through it at the time.
Definitely. And Richard?
Yeah, I agree with Charlotte. It gives everybody, the last 4 or 5 months have given everybody a chance to think about either their business or their personal situations more. Luckily, we got a dog just before lockdown, and that's been our passport to leave the house and walk for an hour and a half every morning. And it cleared your head, and you think, okay, well, we've been doing this, we're growing and growing and growing. We were taking on more people, we were taking on more projects, we were probably just going for the growth kill because that's what we thought was the best thing to do. And now we're thinking, actually, it's quality, it's customer care, it's looking after the staff, calm down and rebuild. And actually rebuilding is a very energizing period to be in, because you've had to reconsider what you do. You looked at your modus operandi and your model and your product and think, okay, well, we can change that and that can be better. And we're being forced to reconsider, which I think is a valuable lesson for everybody. And I'm very confident that there will be some very creative, very successful companies next year. And I think by this time next year, we'll be not back to complete normality, but it'll certainly be, as long as sporting events will happen and people are confident going out, the industry will be coming back, maybe 20% smaller than it was, but it'll certainly be coming back.
Which actually answers my next question on how do you see your business in 12 months? But I was thinking it's actually going to be quite a hard one to answer, because obviously of all the uncertainty, but you did a great job there. So Charlotte, how do you see it coming back in 12 months?
I have great hopes that by the end of next year that we will be looking and seeing the figures that we had experienced at the end of 2019. So that's my personal goal and achievement. What that looks like in terms of bodies in an office environment, I think that the flexible work, what this has taught a lot of people is that it is easier to, there's an ease around flexible working. I'm still personally very skeptical within creative agencies that you can't brainstorm and you can't really be creative in a remote environment. I think that's very difficult because you need to be face to face to have that kind of interaction. But I think that, and I'm talking also, I think a lot of the content that I'm talking about, I've also got my EvCom hat on alongside the agency hat on. And obviously the EvCom hat does talk to the sector involved in screen and film alongside the agency world. But I think that there is an opportunity next year for change and for growth, and for a hugely strategic approach to the way in which we all operate over the next 18 months. And I think we have to take a very strategic approach and be very focused. And it's not necessarily, I think the days of having an ego about, the size of one's business or what one's doing or, shouting for the rooftops. I think we've had to be quite careful because there are a lot of people going through very, very difficult circumstances at the moment about the projecting. And I think that, as I said, there's greater room for collaboration and working together and supporting one another. And I think the industry, there's a great place for a support network, and for associations actually like EVCOM to play a bigger part in how to support and help not just agencies but freelancers and people who are, you know, generally, you know, trying to see the wood from the trees. So that's quite a broad answer to your question, but I think that I would like for us to be back to a level of what the new normal will be, but it won't ever go back to where it once was, because I think that the working from home situation has altered that, and that we will probably never all be back in an office 5 days a week moving forwards, but we will all be back, you know, for 2/3 of that week eventually.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at as well. And Richard, before we take questions from the public, maybe you had anything else to add to your vision?
No, and Charlotte touched on the supporting angle, and I think you're right. It's down to the people that either run the companies or have been working in this industry for a long time, and particularly the associations like Com and like Leah and this, to actually be supportive and come to the front now and say, there's a lot of people, there will be a lot of people out there in the next 3 months who deserve jobs, but because people aren't coming back with the same number of staff as they were, there's going to be very talented people who are looking for things to do. And I think we need to all be very supportive of that and get out and say, okay, we might not be able to offer a full-time job for this person, but that group of freelancers we always use, you get first shot of everything that comes in, and we'll look after you on that respect. And anybody we can use for like 2 days a week or a day a week, or let's just keep people working, keep people in the industry to pick up little bits of work when they are, because that gives them confidence. They might get the job back, they might then get introduced to somebody else. It comes back to social events again, but you know, if the agency, if the associations aren't having lots of meetings and getting all these young people who have maybe lost their jobs in a room together, I think they're missing a trick. There's this whole industry full of creative, talented people who are desperately want to be in the event business, and they just want to run events. So we need to keep them close to us, because we're going to need them next year. We might not be able to afford them this year, but we'll certainly need them next year.
Yeah, for sure, and a lot of opportunity there. So now let's turn to the questions from the public. So we've got one from Amy, who's asked, have the industry associations let us down? They seem quite slow on the uptake, whilst private sector companies have led from the front. Something seems to be going wrong here, as we're getting nothing from the government. It's a tricky one to answer. Charlotte, you might want to take the lead. I can see you're ready.
Sure, Charlotte.
I think that I think that associations have been hit extremely hard by this pandemic. First of all, they are non-for-profit, not-for-profit organizations, the majority of them. And so, you know, when sponsorship dries up and they still have a level of membership fees that come in, but they're unable to produce revenue around events, as face-to-face events as well. So I think that it's important to say that they are struggling. I would say that EVCOM have done, I think, a phenomenal job around the content that they have been pushing out to their membership and also to various contacts. They've been doing a webinar every single week through the entire of lockdown around a different topic with different speakers. And they've generated a lot of interest out of that. And, you know, they are also on skeleton staff and they don't have an office to work in. And, you know, so I can't speak for every association, but I think that they're doing everything that they can, but they're also trying to stay afloat. And I think it's one of the challenges is that, and something that I have personally experienced as being not just the chair of EVCOM, but being a business owner, there's a very different perspective that comes with being a business owner to being somebody that works for a business. And I'm not saying either perspective is right or wrong, but these perspectives are very, very, very different. And being a business owner, you are worrying about your livelihood almost all of the time. And actually what the implications are, not just of your own livelihood, but also of the livelihood of the people that work for you, that you may well have to affect their lives in a very detrimental way because you don't have a choice in which to let them go whatever. So I think that it's, you know, as an employee, I would imagine, and from what I've experienced myself being on the receiving end, obviously, you know, one's desperately concerned about one's job and what the future holds for each and every person. I think, you know, everyone's very involved with their own personal circumstances, entirely understandably. And there are two very different perspectives. And sometimes employees don't understand the decisions that an employer has to make, but the employer has to make the choices and decisions, as associations do, in order to stay afloat. And at the moment, unfortunately, most of the choices are governed by money, and you can't get around that.
Yeah, it's a tough period for everyone, for sure. And Richard, do you have anything to add, just as a, obviously from the event side and business owner?
No, I understand about the associations having reduced funds to put events on. I think it's imperative that the larger companies continue to support associations that they bought into in the past. We've seen that if you don't have a large voice, you don't get to the front of the queue. Look at the government and the money for the arts. We haven't got a Sam Mendes to write to the Chancellor saying, you know, you need to protect the performing arts. So we need the associations, and I think that what they need to do is to approach the businesses still thriving and still being busy going forward in the next 6 months. So you need to support this, because you are then supporting the whole industry. And I think one thing we've learned is that if you don't have a cohesive voice, whether it be from the publishing arm of the industry or from the associations, then your voice gets lost a bit in the clamour for attention. And I think, you know, Martin Pollard from Mass Media has done incredibly well and been on a lot of television. And Kate Nichols from Hospitality UK has done an amazing job, absolutely amazing. But everybody needs a crowd behind them and put their shoulders to the wheel as well, and let them know that we appreciate it, that we want to be heard more, and what can we, as companies that are still operating, do to help.
Yeah, for sure. And so the next question is asking, the retail industry has historically used behavioral psychologists to better understand the way people shop. Have you ever heard of this being used in the events and travel industries? And could psychology insights be useful for understanding confidence and perception? That asks Rebecca from Vimeo.
I think that we do it in a different way. I think that I haven't necessarily heard of psychologists per se working in that way, but we do a lot of survey work and we do a lot of data analytics around events in terms of people attending events, and now the data and analytics side of things in terms of people, how people are behaving online and at face-to-face events, and obviously primarily online at the moment. It's much easier to access those analytics because everything's online, and online it's much easier to download them. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's a psychology in the true sense, but it is psychology, because obviously we've got access to people's behavior when they're dealing with you know, engaging on a screen. So we have access to that information in a greater way. I think in terms of psychology in the true sense, you know, I think, and I'm going to give her a plug, Laura from Stress Matters has done a lot of work with a lot of companies and a lot of agencies in our event space to work on the well-being side of our industry, which has really needed a lot of help and work, and something that, you know, a large portion of people have really suffered from. It doesn't, you know, and I suppose she's therefore gathered quite a lot of information about behavior within our sector, and that's probably the closest that I can get to psychology being used in our industry. Richard, I don't know what you think about that.
No, but for the last part of Lauren's question about would it be able to help with the confidence about going back, I think that would work. I don't know how it would work, and I don't know how you'd engage people to make sure it happens. But it's things like when you've done your profiles of asking people, if these protocols were put in place, would you come to an event venue and go to the conference. Now that information is vital because it shows that people are saying, yes, these are the things we need to be confident about, because then I can either say to my family, I'm going to be safe when I go to that event, and the host can say, I'm not putting people at an in a bad risk element to it. So if we can convince people that it is a serious assessment of what's going on, that we're not putting them at risk, but this is a very valuable part of either engagement with clients or with staff, then psychologically people need to buy into it. That my psychological going on the bus in an hour's time. You know, if I feel that it's going to be fairly empty and I can wear gloves, I can put my mask on, I'll be okay, then you know, I will probably go. If I think there's going to be someone with a hacking cough and I'm going to be put into a corner next door to him, then I'm not going to go because I won't feel safe. So my psychology is building up to, I want to go on the bus because I want to be able to just go into the West End like I always have done. And that's what psychologists need, I suppose, to take this raw data that people like MySpace do to say, yeah, you know, people are keen to go as long as these things are put in place and people are made to feel it's important to go.
Yeah.
How you engage them to do that, I don't know.
I think that we actually did ask that question in a survey that we sent out recently to our database of clients and contacts. And I think it was about 65 to 70% of people said that they would feel confident in going back to producing face-to-face events and attending once they knew that there was a vaccine in place. And it was the vaccine actually that really made the difference to the majority of people that we asked.
Yeah. We did a similar survey as well, and we found that the demographics actually had an impact on who would be willing to attend, and obviously safety measures put in place at those events. So I think communication is key there. So lastly, I think we have quick, we can quickly answer the last question. So Olga's asking, what advice would you give to people who have been recently made redundant and looking for a new job in the events industry?
My personal advice would be to, and actually I'm offering advice to any members of our team that we've sadly had to make redundant. We are helping to remodel their CVs. We are helping them to look at how their skill set is adaptable into different sectors, how possibly they could retrain depending on the age that they are. I would look at how you can take the skills that you've used in the event sector so far and you can adapt those. And I would spend this time, if I had the resources to do it and I was sitting on redundancy pay of some description, I would utilize that time to upskill, probably in a technical digital capacity for the time being, or in a social media space in terms of the campaign space. Because I think that a lot of people in the industry are going to look to expand teams based on that skill set. But I would definitely look to adapt the skill set and look at remodeling the skills that you currently have for areas that you can actually which are valuable right now.
I agree with that last point particularly. I think what people need to be aware of is keeping their head above the parapet and letting people know they're still around. So keep in touch with your ex-employer. There won't be very many networking events going on for the next few weeks to put face names, but make sure that if there are, you go to them. Keep involved in things like the high-space protocols you're doing. Maybe do some voluntary work. Keep your hand in. You know, offer to do things either at a reduced rate or free if you can go and help someone set up something or just be around, because it's going to be the vocal people that you see and hear from that you'll think of first. In like trading your business out of it, if your clients forget you're there, then they'll phone the first person in contact, actually. So if you're the employee who is the one that everybody hears from and sees around and keep posting and blogging and learning things that Charlotte did, and a bit like we've all been doing in the lockdown, posting pictures of food we've cooked or places we've been, or it's marketing yourself back into the business.
You're absolutely right. And on that note, unfortunately, we've run out of time for today. So thank you both for joining us, and to all of our audience for listening in. Don't forget that you can browse the latest version of our Safer Events white paper provided in the link below. And we look forward to having you in our next live stream, which will be taking place in a fortnight time on the 29th of July. And as always, if you have any questions for panelists the following time, please email us on covid19@hirespace.com or message us on social media handles @hirespace. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.